This is another video in the basic workflow series for OpenStudio 0.6. We chose a template, made our envelope, set up the activities for the different spaces and thermostats and thermal zones, and now we're ready to add a mechanical system. I saved this file in SketchUp, in the SketchUp plugin in the last video, and so now I'm going to launch SystemOutliner. So I'm going to go to my programs and OpenStudio SystemOutliner. Instead of choosing a new file, I'm going to open one, and on the desktop I have a folder set up. This first tab that we see here just lets us inspect the schedules that are included, and we have a pull down to look at the different schedules. But this next tab is more important. It lets us see the thermal zones. Now you notice my thermal zones are named here. I did that after I stopped recording the last video. We have 10 spaces still in our model, but we only have 5 thermal zones because we combined a number of spaces into thermal zones. And we can see if we did have any air loops hooked up, or if ideal air loads was on, we would see that, and we can see our thermostats. Outdoor air sizing is something that will be available in our next major release. But the important tab I want to jump to here is the HVAC Systems tab. We have a number of templates in our libraries under the Loops tab. These first two actually are not loops. These are zone equipment systems that don't require a loop. Then we have a number of systems that use air loops, and in some cases also plant loops. So for this demonstration, I'm going to go to something that's similar to System Type 7 for ASHRAE Appendix G, which is going to be this system here. What these icons mean in each loop, the left icon tells you what's being used for cooling. So here we have cool water from a plant. Here we have DX cooling. We have electric heating here, hot water plant here, a variable speed fan, and if you saw a C instead, it would be a constant speed fan. And then we have a terminal, and some of the terminals have reheat, in this case hot water, in this case electric, and in some cases we have a direct terminal that doesn't have any reheat. And here's an example of a constant speed fan, and this arrow is only used in conjunction with DX cooling, and it's when you use that, it's being used as a heat pump. So that's what those mean. If you want to build systems from scratch, we do have empty plants. But so what I'm going to do here is make 2 air loops, and then on each of these I'm going to go to the first one here, and notice I have some plant loops too, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But I'm going to go to the first air loop, and I'm going to click the zones from the first floor, and I'm going to add them in. And to do that, I either picked on the zone mixer or the zone splitter. If I click one of these in cooling coils or hot water coils, I can see what plant loop it's hooked up to, and I can actually go to that plant loop. And I'm going to rename it. So I'm going to call this cooling or cold water. And I'm going to go back here to my air loop and go to this one. And I'm going to select this to change it, and I'm going to call this hot water. And I'll show you why I'm doing that. I'm going to go to my second air loop. I don't want to have 2 different plant systems in this building. I want to have one, and our templates create an extra one. So all I have to do is just link this up to cold water, link this up to hot water. It'll unhook it up there, and then I can go to my extra plant loops and just delete them out of the project, which would be plant loop 3 and 4. Now let's just to go back to what we have here now. If you notice on the air loop where my zones are going to be hooked up, this is going to be the second floor. There is a supply side to the loop, which is the top, and a demand side, which is the bottom. And the demand side is the zones. That's where the demand's coming from. So here, the water is on the supply side, but when we jump to the plant loop, water is now on the demand side. And it's the pump and the chiller, in this case, that's on the supply side meeting that demand. So this just gives you a sense of how Energy Plus treats the systems. And we're protective here. If you were to try to edit this and add on things, let's, for example, say evaporative cooling. You can add evaporative cooling onto your outdoor air. That's acceptable, and we let you do that. But if you try to add evaporative cooling somewhere on the demand side, we're going to protect you from putting things in places that Energy Plus won't let them. So when you see those dialogues, that's what that means. So we're pretty much done here in SystemOutliner. You can zoom out if you want to see more of this here. We, in the end, have 2 air loops, both linking to the same plant loop. Actually, let's check one more thing here. On the second air loop, these terminals might need to be hooked up correctly to hot water because I deleted the plant loop 3 and 4. Okay, so now we're good. So I'm going to save as just a new name just to keep everything clean. I always like to have multiple copies of everything. so you can go back to an earlier version. So I'm going to call this HVAC and save it. So that's really all for this video. In the next video, we'll go into SketchUp, we'll run it, and we'll look at some of the results from the simulation.